And we're back here on SportsLine. Phone lines are open, 737-7767, if you'd like to get in on the program tonight. Kevin, nice enough to call in. Kevin, you're first up here on SportsLine.
Hey, Steve. How are you tonight, my friend?
I'm doing well. Thanks for the call.
Hey, listen, I want to talk about Butch Jones and the Tennessee Volunteers. I just kind of wanted to remind the Vol Nation that if you look back on the history of Tennessee football, we've basically been a 7-9 win season every year. You know, we've not really actually been the perennial power that all the hype train has played us out to be. You know, we're not Alabama. And basically that's what we've been as far as the decisions that were made as far as the coaching staff this year. I just think that the last couple of years that we haven't really recruited the kind of football players that actually Butch Jones recruited in the first couple of years. I mean, you know, you've got some teams in the SEC that are doing a really, really great job. You know, Derek Mason, he took a Vanderbilt team that nobody thought would ever win 4 or 5 games this year, and they're in a bowl game. But I just wanted to remind the Ball Nation that if you look back during the Dooley administration, I call it, we didn't fare too well, but I don't think this is what's expected. I mean, Mac Brown at Texas, it took him 8 years before Texas won a national championship. And it's going to take a little time, and I think that we need to be a little bit more patient. And I just wanted to remind the Ball Nation that, hey, you know, the brick-by-brick process just can't be done overnight.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think the frustrating thing here was you had an upperclassman-laden team, and you had stars who had performed in the past. I mean, this was a team that won 9 games last year and essentially had everybody back after that thrashing in the bowl game. And I think people just thought that they were going to take the next step. And early on in the year, they did to some degree. I mean, they broke through and beat Florida. Then they followed it up with the win at Georgia. And then things fell apart with the Jalen Hurd transfer and losing to South Carolina and losing to Vanderbilt at the end of the year. I think that's what had people frustrated, is the tease of the beginning of the year that said, okay, this team really is legit and taking the next step for this program this year, and then they couldn't get it done. And whether that's on players, whether that's on a lack of team chemistry, which I think it was pretty clear that something was amiss this year in the locker room over there. You don't lose a player of Jalen Hurd's caliber if everything's hunky-dory. And so something was just off with this team. And at some point, that comes back to Butch Jones as well, don't you think? I mean, to me, the way I would caution it is you look back at where they were under Dooley and Kiffin, and even maybe the last couple of years under Phil Fulmer going in the wrong direction. This has been fairly steady progress for Tennessee. Yes, this year maybe feels like it was right on par with last year and didn't take the step forward you wanted. But from year 1 to year 4 has been pretty much a climb for Butch Jones. And so now the question is he the right guy to get you to the next step? And I think there's differing opinions on that, but I think he's earned the right to get a new team in, see if he can have new chemistry with that, and see if he can get to the next step. And, you know, he gets a huge recruit today in Trey Smith. Those are the types of guys that hopefully get you to the next level. But it's the fact that they didn't get there this year and the way the year started that I think has people so frustrated.
Hey, Steve, I got a question I wanted to ask you. Do you remember in the Northwestern game, Tennessee lined up in the power I?
Yep.
Do you think maybe if they would have gone with the power I offense this year instead of the type of offense they would have ran, do you think maybe that Jalen Hurd might have stayed and the Tennessee offense might have been a lot better and the team might have rallied a lot better against around the power I offense?
There's certainly been some rumors about that Jalen Hurd asked essentially last year that he wanted to see that happen and be a more physical running team, go to the I formation and get more carries that way. It worked to great success in that game. They really abandoned it early in the year. They did it a few times against Appalachian State and did not have much success. And it's almost like they abandoned it completely. The biggest criticism I think I have of the coaching staff this year, and I know there's a lot of them out there, but this was an offensive line that essentially came back, had 5-star talent in spots, and they were worse They were demonstrably worse than they were a year ago. And I think to some degree they thought we can't line up and smash mouth people with this offensive line. And I don't have the answer for why that was, but that's what it looked like when you watch Tennessee, that there was just no trust or faith in that offensive line to get the job done in the trenches. And so the best part of their team, those running backs, they just tried to get them in space as much as they could. That's probably not Jalen Hurd's forte, and I think that probably did lead to some of the issues between him and the coaching staff or him and teammates during the course of the year. I don't think that excuses how that all went down, but I think it very well could have played a factor.
Hey, Steve, I'm seeing Nebraska over Tennessee. I hate to admit it, but I think Nebraska's a much physical team up front, and I don't see us stopping their run game.
I think they are more physical, and Kevin, we appreciate the call. I think they are more physical than Tennessee in the trenches right now. To me, the biggest question about this game is Tennessee going to be motivated? They've played really well in bowl games the last 2 years, but in both of those games, how geeked were Tennessee fans? And you have to assume the players. I mean, I remember a couple years ago when Butch Jones made the announcement that they were going to the Tax Slayer Bowl and playing in January. And that team room exploded. Guys were jumping up and down and basically had a dog pile in the middle of the room. They wanted to play in January and play in Florida. That was a step that they wanted to take. The Music City Bowl is basically the Tax Slayer Bowl. You know, that's like they're right next to each other. They have interchanging picks in the pecking order with the SEC. So it's no worse bowl than that. But because of getting to 9 wins last year, going to the Outback Bowl, winning that one, and now playing in a game that's just down the road in your state after losing the way they did to end the season against Vanderbilt, it just doesn't feel like there's the same level of excitement. And if you're a Tennessee fan, please chime in, 737-7767. Am I wrong on that? Is there more excitement about this game and the fact that it's here in Nashville and there should be a lot of orange in the crowd? Am I missing that, or does it feel like a letdown after the past couple of years and after the way this season started out? That's the way it feels. And so often when you look at these bowl games that are outside of the playoff or maybe the Rose Bowl or the New Year's Six type of bowls, you start to look at the motivation of the teams. Who really wants to be there and who is maybe just looking at it as a vacation for a few days. And I think when you look at this, there's a real concern that after 2 years in which Tennessee was sky high and ready to play, looking to make a point in the game, that this could be the year where they look like a team that maybe doesn't really want to be there. Meanwhile, if you're Nebraska, the Cornhuskers slid out of the rankings at the end of the season here while losing to good teams, pretty much. I mean, their losses are at Wisconsin in a fairly tight game until the very end. They got blown out at Ohio State after Tommy Armstrong, their quarterback, got hurt in the game. And then they lost to Iowa in the final game of the year. Those are 3 ranked teams. 2 of them are in the top 10. All 3 games are on the road. Those are their losses, and they fell out of the top 25, according to the College Football Playoff Committee. Here they are facing a Tennessee team that somehow is still in the top 25 at number 21 at the year's end. SEC team, ranked team, opportunity for Nebraska to get to 10 wins. To me, I think Nebraska is going to come to Music City with a lot of energy. I think they're going to come with a lot of excitement, and they're going to feel like they have an opportunity to validate their season and their program against Tennessee. Will the Vols match that? To me, that's the question in the game. I think Tennessee has more talent than Nebraska on the roster that isn't injured at this point, and that's a question mark. But I think Tennessee's the more talented team. I think Nebraska is probably the more physical team in the trenches, which is certainly a concern for Tennessee. And I think they're going to be motivated. And if they show up motivated and Tennessee doesn't, that could be a big problem for the Vols. If Tennessee can match it, then I think they're probably going to win the game. But what is the attitude? What is the mindset for Butch Jones's team when they come over here, short drive from Knoxville to Nashville towards the end of the month? That, to me, will tell the story of the Music City Bowl. You can say that about every game. Western Kentucky in the Boca Raton Bowl against Memphis with no Jeff Brom. You're talking about the Conference USA champs, but now they don't have a head coach. They don't know who their coach is going to be next year. How focused are they right now? Are they getting better? Are they at practice and doing everything they need to do? If a new coach comes in and he's from the outside, how does that distract? What does the interim coach do for them in the game? And their game's relatively early. It's December 20th, which is 14 days from now. So they're going to be on the practice field right now during the course of this week, getting ready, getting set for that game. And there's coaching turmoil around them. How will they be able to respond taking on a good Memphis team? They went 8-4. That's what you always have to look at when you look at these bowl games, outside of the playoff. Outside of the games where you know both teams have equal motivation. 737-7767 is the number. Speaking of the playoff, I had no real problem with what the College Football Selection Committee ultimately did and gave us with Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Washington. I thought those four teams had very deserving resumes and belong in the Final Four. But I also think there's some other teams out there that can make some strong cases. Penn State at the front of the line. The Nittany Lions won their final 9 games of the year. They beat Ohio State, who's in the playoff field. They won the toughest division in football, followed it up by winning a top 10 game against Wisconsin in dominant fashion in the second half to win the best league in football this year. And then they get left out. They get left out because they got pummeled by Michigan early on, and they lost at Pitt. Those 2 losses are what left them out. But I tell you what, I'm not sure I want to face Penn State right now. I'm not sure I don't think Penn State beats Washington on a neutral field. The way they've played down the stretch of the season in some other comparative games, not just the actual result in State College, but competitive and comparable games down the stretch of the year, I'm not sure Penn State's not better than Ohio State right now. But they're not in. Likewise, I'm not sure I don't think Michigan is actually the second best team in the country after Alabama. They were better than Ohio State for almost all of that game a couple of weekends ago. If Wilton Speight wasn't injured and struggled so mightily in that game with turnovers, 3 huge turnovers, if they can somehow erase that, or if he's 100% and doesn't play like that, Michigan wins that game on the road. They win the Big Ten East, play Wisconsin with the chance to win the Big Ten. I realize they didn't win it, and because of that, it's difficult to argue their inclusion. But I'm not sure if you gave them the chance to play it out, then Michigan isn't the second best team in the country and doesn't have the best shot to beat Alabama of anybody else. But they're not in it. The other one, and I don't think Oklahoma should be in there, but look at the argument Oklahoma can make, especially up against a team like Washington. Washington's non-conference schedule, they played Idaho, Portland State, and Rutgers. As terrible as Rutgers was, that was their non-conference schedule. Oklahoma, meanwhile, played at Houston in the opening week of the year and took Oklahoma in Norman. I mean, those are massive, massive games in the non-conference. OU loses them, and they should be knocked for that, but they lose tough games that they went out and scheduled. And then they come back and run the table. First team to ever go 9-0 in Big 12 conference play. Finished 10-2. Big 12 champions. Their losses are in the non-conference in weeks 1 and weeks 3 against really good teams. One of them, which is in the playoff. Washington plays no one in the conference or non-conference. They get into the Pac-12. They win it, but they lose a game badly to USC in the middle of the season. Washington's in because their record is 12-1 and they're the Pac-12 champs. Oklahoma is out because their record is 10-2, even though they're the Big 12 champs. Why should Bob Stoops and Joe Castiglione, the athletic director at Oklahoma, why should they keep scheduling aggressively to have those marquee matchups, made-for-TV matchups early on in the season? Why? Why would you do it? If they played Rutgers, Portland State, and Idaho, those are 3 wins. Those are 3 wins for Oklahoma. If they run the table in the Big 12, if they're 12-0, they're the number 2 seed in the field. Doesn't matter that they didn't play anybody. If they were 12-0 after doing what they did in the Big 12, Oklahoma would be the number 2 seed and they would be playing Clemson. That is just the bottom line. So why this whole thing, the whole thing about the playoff was supposed to make the regular season matter so much, and I think it does for a large part. It was also supposed to encourage scheduling of games like that, of Oklahoma and Houston, of Oklahoma and Ohio State. Oklahoma's played Notre Dame recently. They have scheduled tough out of the league to bolster their resume, to try to impress the committee. And this year it completely backfired because they lost those games, which, look, that's on them. You got to win the games. But they lose the games. Meanwhile, Washington plays no one. They have no chance of losing them. And Washington gets in, and Oklahoma's out. So why should Bob Stoops and Joe Castiglione schedule tough next year? Or the year after, or the next year that they can affect the schedule? Why should they do it? What is the benefit? Because what you saw with Washington is if you just take care of the games on your schedule and have a good record, you're going to be there at the end. 737-7767 is the number. Hello, Jay. You're next up here on SportsLine.
Hey, Steve. I just now joined you. Sorry I'm late, but this Final Four, I'm happy with it. I think, at the beginning of the season, everybody was wanting the matchup between Ohio State and Alabama. I think that was the dream matchup, which I think that may happen. But what do you think about Washington? I know a lot of times when they're on, I'm in bed after watching a SEC game, but what do you think about their defense? I know they say their defense is pretty good. And also, Vanderbilt, I'm excited about them. Congratulations. We're going to Independence Bowl. Looking forward to going down there. And just wonder what you thought about Washington's defense. Like I said, it's on so late, and I go to bed, and I just wonder what you thought. Thanks.
Yep, no problem. Thank you. Appreciate the call. I'm excited about Vanderbilt and their chances to get a winning season, that's for sure. And that would be huge for Derek Mason, where they were this season. If they can win their final 3 games and get to 7-6, what a great story in year 3. And as you look around the SEC and a bunch of coaches that may start next year on the hot seat for one reason or another, I think Derek Mason starts next year in great position at Vanderbilt based off of where they come from and where they are now. In terms of Washington, that is a defense that is really good. Unfortunately for them, Alabama's defense is even better. And so the question will be, can Jake Browning, who's a good quarterback, and John Ross, who's a great wide receiver, can those guys do damage against that Alabama defense? Can that offensive line hold up, give Browning time, and let Ross and company make plays against the Alabama secondary? That's going to really be the question, because Washington's going to have to be able to put up some points, and most people have not been able to put up points against Alabama this year. As a matter of fact, the Alabama defense is practically scoring as many points by themselves as opposing teams' offenses are against them. That's how dominant they've been. Washington's going to be a test. Washington's probably the best team Alabama's played this year. USC's really good. USC's another one of those teams that if you were truly looking for the best teams right now, or maybe the better example is if you add an 8 or a 16-team playoff or whatever, and they were in, they'd be a team you'd be looking at that, oh, they might be a 10 seed or something, but could seriously make a run. USC's really good, but they weren't that good when Alabama played them in week 1 and before Sam Darnold became their quarterback. That was a different looking team. So who's the best team that Alabama's played? What's the best win? Is it Auburn? Rankings-wise, I'd probably say yeah. Texas A&M before they kind of fell apart down the stretch when Trevor Knight was out? Maybe. You know, those are tough comparisons. But for Washington, they're going to be a test. But I think that's a really good matchup for Alabama because I think their defense will overwhelm Washington for the most part. I think Alabama will be able to put up points. I think if you're looking at a team to beat Alabama, the winner of Ohio State Clemson gives them their toughest test, as it should be, in the finals. And I think of that matchup, I think Clemson's the team that scares you the most because of Deshaun Watson. He'll be the best player on the field. And all the weapons they have in the passing game. I don't think you're going to be able to line up and just run at Alabama. You're going to have to make plays on the outside. Last year, Clemson did in the national championship game. Just unfortunately for them, not enough. They'll have to do that again. And to me, that's why I think they've got the best recipe. Still a long shot. I think Alabama's really, really good. One of the best teams we've ever seen, probably. But Clemson's the one team that, to me, has the recipe to give them a game in the playoff. All right, we got to take a break. We will come back right after this. More SportsLine on the way here on News Channel 5+.